So here we are, it's Sunday now, a day after there's been a big announcement about some changes in the way that Phuket will allow people to travel to the island. Also on the island is Bill Barnett from C9 Hotel Works. We're both sort of stuck here on the island. Apparently we can leave, but Bill, can we get back?
That seems to be the question. I think there's a lot of clarification right now in terms of policy. It's a very fluid situation. I think hotels are grappling right now what to do next. I think it's really a perfect storm right now after the busy kind of New Year time. What's next for tourism? But right now, I think that's a big issue.
Phuket and Samui and some of the other small islands have been probably the worst affected out of all of Thailand's tourism, because you sort of have to fly there. You can't just sort of drive there as conveniently as you can to other tourist locations. This is a second big wave for Phuket. Can it survive?
I think the main thing is, this is a national crisis. Chiang Mai is effectively shut down. Pattaya is effectively shut down. So we're saying this is a broad crisis. It's not simply isolated about Phuket as well. So I think you have to talk about a national issue. In terms of Phuket, certainly, I think the stay-at-home order is tantamount to saying, please close hotels. I think for the hotel business right now, hotel owners will say maybe the government should actually issue a close order, because at least there'll be social security. But this period right now is extremely damaging to the economy.
What's the rules for employers at the moment, like for these hotels? Do they have to still pay for their employees?
Right now, that's the biggest issue, because right now there's a recommendation, but I think and they've really delegated this downwards to the provinces. But I think that's the biggest issue really for, on a national basis, is that there has to be intervention by the government, by the national government, in terms of social security, in terms of a debt moratorium, lending. That's very important. I think there has to be government action in that standpoint for hotels to survive.
Well, over the past month or so, there's sort of been a slow increase of traffic, mostly, of course, domestic tourism here in Phuket. How are they going to start winding things up after this second wave eventually dissipates?
I think the real issue now for hotels, in our view, sadly, 2021 is a bigger risk than than last year. I think that's probably a bigger issue, for hotels, because last year we saw business starting to come back towards the new year. We see flights coming back, a certain level of business and cash flow. Right now, there's the utter stoppage of travel. I think that's unknown territory. And really, until the vaccine comes, we're not going to see a turnaround, because you can't say we recommend don't travel, but then all of a sudden let's travel again. The vaccine is the only end game. So we're in a tunnel right now, and the tunnel it's a long tunnel, but how do we get out of that tunnel? That's only the vaccine. That's the reality.
What can the government do, or what can even the provincial governments do to sort of stimulate things once this passes?
I think there has to be better communications. We see right now there's confusion. Even over the past week, there was the impression that Phuket was closed and people stopped traveling after the New Year holidays. I think that was damaging in terms of clarifying that. And I think also that the provincial government needs to work with the national government. This is a national crisis. This is not only a Phuket crisis. Phuket is one part of the puzzle as well. And the economic issue. One thing we understand, though, clearly is that when you talk to people on the ground and you talk to Phuket people, the fear factor is overlying more than the financial consideration. There's still fear out there about the virus, and I think that really is the most profound thing that has to be dealt with by the government.
Well, each province has sort of got their own guidelines. Like the Phuket was 3 pages of documentation we had to wade through, and it's quite complex. And it took us probably about 2 hours to figure out, can we come back to Phuket or not? Just to describe, if I was in Bangkok at the moment, in what we call one of the safer parts of Bangkok, because some of the districts are on a different category than other districts in Bangkok. Where I work in Bangkok, in the Asok area, in theory I thought, well, it's a safe area, we can come back to Phuket without going through a 14-day self-quarantine. But in fact, anybody from Bangkok coming to Phuket, no matter which part of Bangkok, would have to, under the current guidelines, go through a 14-day self-quarantine. But it took us quite a long time to wade through all the words. And that's just one province. And each of the provinces are sort of handling this on their own at the moment.
I think that's one of the bigger issues as well. It's a health crisis too. We understand the underlying health nature as well, but for businesses, this now encompasses the airlines, this encompasses any business which operates and has to have a flow of traffic from other provinces as well. With Phang Nga, with Khao Lak, certainly there's a question now in terms of how could visitors come, because visitors for Khao Lak mostly arrive at Phuket International Airport, so how can you transpire? So this is throwing the hotel industry, frankly, into chaos right now about what's going to happen next. And I think there needs to be some definitive answer, and I think personally that there should be a closure order for hotels, because that would allow Social Security to kick in, it would allow for economic measures, because you can't possibly operate, aside from Bangkok, hotels in Chiang Mai, hotels in Pattaya, hotels in Phuket, hotels in Samui, they can't possibly operate profitably with this restrictions in place.
Well, at least there'd be some sort of certainty. Let's have a talk about the airlines. There's 5 low-cost airlines who have been back up in the air for the past 7 months, but now they're cancelling, combining flights, coming back. The last 2 weeks has been quite complex and a lot of changes to the flight schedules. They can't all last this.
I think that's one of the most disturbing. Destinations rely on airlift. You can't stay there if you can't get there, and certainly for Phuket. I mean, one of the maybe comforting things about Phuket from an international perspective is the Middle East airlines, people like Emirates, Qatar, these type of airlines are quite solid because they're the only, they're key drivers of those national economies, and those will continue. But certainly from the Thai perspective, the instability in aviation is a concern. But I think, again, this is something every country around the world is facing with aviation, because aviation and tourism are interlinked.
Bill, I mean, Phuket's been built on the hospitality industry, the F&B industry. So, is there some shock here for business people on the island to say, well, we can't just rely on tourism in the future. There has to be some other way of generating income for people living and working on the island, because these sort of events may happen again in the future.
I think that's a larger issue, and that goes back to our issue about should Phuket be its own special economic zone, similar to Bangkok, similar to Pattaya, having some determination. As long as we have a rotating governor, political appointee, there's no master plan for tourism, as well as, until there's a Phuket master plan that can be executed, infrastructure to diversify into other industries, it's a one-trick pony.
So you're suggesting Phuket, rather than having an appointed governor by the central government, should have an elected position?
Sure, because again, this goes back to Pattaya, this goes back to Bangkok. There's determination and there's accountability. Right now, we get governors who are on the end of their tenure at other posts and about to retire. This is their last post before going. There's no continuity.
Everybody wants Phuket.
Exactly.
The beaches.
Yeah, there's no continuity of policy. So until you have a sustainable master plan that can continue, and that's infrastructure. And I think one thing that we look at certainly is we think that, in our assessment, there'll be a China pivot coming out of this, because in terms of the big infrastructure projects and everything else, when you're looking for funding of this, you're going to have foreign funding for that. So we think that mainland China will continue to invest back into Thailand, and we think that's going to be a China pivot, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I know people say, oh, it's all China's going to own Thailand, but who's going to build the railways? Who's going to build the expressways? Who's going to build the infrastructure? Unless the Thais gear up, there has to be money coming in and a well thought out plan, and that really is the way we think it's going to go.
Expect some comments about that, Bill. Let's finish by saying you speak to the people in the hotel industry and the Hotels Association here every day. What are some of the stories coming out, the personal stories about financial problems and managing this crisis?
I think it's nice to sit in a restaurant, where we're sitting today and everything else, but there is poverty in the streets. There is poverty. People can't afford to pay their bills. I think when you come down to school, people paying school fees, the damage to the economy is widespread, and these are the stories you don't see. And I think that's probably the saddest thing when we see, it's the people who are the hidden, those hidden stories of the economic downturn. I think that's the real thing coming out of this, in terms of what's going to happen to those people going forward, because they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They don't know where the fees for their school is going to come for their kids as well. And this is the crisis. This is a service industry, but it's about people. Okay, this is not about product, it's not brand, anything else. It's about hotel business is a people business, and what's going to happen to these people who work in hotels or who work in tourism businesses. That's a crisis.
Well, you're not going to have to roll up your sleeve for the vaccine, because you're always wearing black T-shirts. Are you in line?
I will be in line. Right now, it's unclear for foreigners where that's going to be. But would I take the vaccine? Certainly.
Yeah, same
I'm
with
in.
me too.
Yeah.
All right. Bill Barnett from C9 Hotel Works. You're right in the front line of this particular problem in Phuket, so we appreciate your time. We'll certainly cross tax over the next couple of weeks, see how poor old Phuket and the other islands that are so important for Thailand's tourism economy are handling this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Bill Barnett from C9 Hotel Works, another Thaiger story.